The idyllic September afternoon of 1981 held a cruel secret for the Herrmann family in Eching am Ammersee, Germany. 10-year-old Ursula, the youngest of 4 children, was a vibrant, intelligent girl brimming with the energy of youth. Her days were a happy blur of school, piano lessons, and her beloved gymnastics, a sport she pursued with boundless enthusiasm, commuting each day the 5 kilometers to the next town, often by bicycle, a route that cut through a quiet, unassuming stretch of forest. This particular day, her first at secondary school, had been filled with new experiences. After her classes, she'd practiced piano with her brother, then cycled to gymnastics before visiting her cousin for dinner. As the twilight softened the edges of the Bavarian landscape, Ursula had set off for the familiar 10-minute ride home, the golden hour still holding the day's warmth. But home she never reached. As the half-hour mark passed and Ursula remained absent, a cold dread began to creep into her mother's heart. A quick call to her sister confirmed the worst. Ursula had left her cousin's house long ago. Panic seizing them, the entire family rushed into the encroaching shadows of the forest, their frantic calls of "Ursula!" echoing unanswered among the trees. The local police were alerted, and soon neighbors joined the desperate search party. Hours turned into a grueling night of futile hope. It was a police dog, straining against its leash, that eventually led them to Ursula's bright red bicycle, abandoned some 20 meters off the main road, its silent presence a stark, terrifying symbol of her disappearance. But of Ursula herself, there was no trace. The forest, which had once been a familiar shortcut, now seemed to swallow her whole. 3 agonizing days later, the first unsettling whispers of a new, sinister chapter began. The Herrmann family phone rang, a jarring sound in the heavy silence of their grief. Upon answering, however, there was no voice, only the disembodied strains of a popular melody, a tune often played on the radio, drifting from the receiver before the line clicked dead. These strange, silent calls became a chilling ritual, repeating sporadically over the next few days. The police, their suspicions aroused, set up recording equipment, convinced that these were not random disturbances, but deliberate signals from Ursula's captors. Each ring brought a fresh wave of terror and a flicker of hope, swiftly extinguished by the lack of any direct communication. Then, several days into this torment, a letter arrived, addressed to Ursula's father. It was a crude mosaic of words, meticulously cut from newspapers and pasted together, a desperate attempt by the sender to conceal their identity in fingerprints. The message was chillingly clear. Ursula had been kidnapped. The ransom demand was astronomical, 2 million Deutschmarks. The sender explicitly stated that further communication would be via telephone, marked by the same unsettling musical interlude, and issued a grave warning. If the police were involved, Ursula would die. The family was plunged into a new, terrifying reality, caught between the suffocating fear for their daughter's life and the impossible demands of her unknown abductors. The very next morning, the phone rang again, filling the house with that all-too-familiar, haunting melody. Ursula's mother, her voice thick with despair and desperation, wept as she agreed to pay the ransom. Her only plea to hear her daughter's voice, a single word to confirm she was alive. But the line remained silent, the music abruptly cutting off before the call disconnected. A few hours later, another letter arrived, this one containing more specific, almost clinical instructions for the ransom drop. The money, 2 million Deutschmarks, was to be entirely in 100 Deutschmark notes packed into a travel suitcase. Ursula's father was to be the sole courier driving his yellow Fiat 600, strictly adhering to a speed limit of 90 kilometers per hour. Yet, in a final cruel twist, the letter failed to specify the crucial details, the time, and, more agonizingly, the location of the drop. The kidnapper, having made their demands, vanished into thin air, leaving the Herrmann family to wait in a void of torturous uncertainty. Weeks crawled by, each day heavier than the last, but the phone remained silent. There were no more calls, no further instructions, just an echoing void where their daughter should have been. The morning after Ursula's parents received the anonymous letter demanding a staggering 2 million Deutschmarks, a phone call came. As the receiver was lifted, the now familiar melody of the Bavarian radio station filled the air, replacing any human voice. Ursula's mother, desperate and consumed by a mother's fear, broke down in tears, agreeing to pay whatever they asked. She pleaded, her voice trembling, to hear her daughter's voice, just one word, but only silence answered her plea before the line went dead. Hours later, another letter arrived, this one even more chillingly precise. The ransom money, it dictated, must consist solely of 100 Deutschmark notes packed into a travel suitcase. Ursula's father, Albert Herrmann, was to be the sole courier, driving his yellow Fiat 600 at a speed not exceeding 90 kilometers per hour. Yet, despite these meticulous instructions, the kidnapper failed to specify the crucial details, the time, and, more importantly, the location for the exchange. And then, as abruptly as he had appeared, the abductor vanished. The phone, once a source of terrifying dread, now remained hauntingly silent. Weeks stretched into an unbearable eternity. The Herrmann family waited, their hope dwindling with each passing day, each unanswered ring, each silent night. Despair began to set in, a heavy shroud enveloping their home as the absence of their youngest child became an ever-present, agonizing void. 19 agonizing days after Ursula's disappearance, with no further contact from the kidnapper, the police mounted an even larger, more desperate search operation. Hundreds of volunteers, sniffer dogs, and advanced detection equipment were mobilized, meticulously combing every inch of the vast, dense forest that separated Ursula's home from her cousins. The air was thick with tension, the sounds of rustling leaves and distant shouts punctuated by the low growl of search dogs. It was during this extensive sweep that a police officer, meticulously examining a less frequented part of the woodland, noticed something amiss. An unusually disturbed patch of earth, barely covered, suggesting a recent burial. A jolt of grim realization went through him. With frantic energy, officers began to dig. What they unearthed was not a simple grave, but a meticulously constructed wooden box, approximately 0.7 meters long, 0.6 meters wide, and over a meter deep. The sight sent a wave of icy dread through everyone present. As the lid was carefully prized open, the horrifying truth of Ursula's fate was revealed. Inside the claustrophobic confines of the box lay the lifeless body of 10-year-old Ursula Herrmann. The discovery was a profound shock, a devastating blow that reverberated far beyond the Herrmann family. The box itself was a macabre testament to the kidnapper's perverse planning and chilling foresight. It was no makeshift coffin, but an elaborate, almost engineered prison. It was fitted with a lock, a small makeshift seat, and contained 3 bottles of water, packets of biscuits, soft drinks, sweets, chocolate, books, and even a small radio. Most crucially, it had a system of plastic tubes designed to provide ventilation. It appeared the kidnapper had intended to keep Ursula alive inside this subterranean cell during the ransom negotiations. However, the design was fatally flawed. The air supply within the confined space would have rapidly diminished, while the external ends of the ventilation tubes, presumably meant to draw in fresh air, had become clogged with wet leaves and earth, effectively sealing her fate. The autopsy results were unequivocal and heartbreaking. Ursula had suffocated to death, likely within a few hours of being buried alive. Her small body had been found in the same clothes she wore on that fateful September afternoon, 19 days earlier. The cause of death was asphyxiation, on the very day she vanished. The focus of the investigation now shifted from a missing person to a horrific murder. Police theorized that the perpetrator must be someone intimately familiar with the sprawling forest, possessing considerable physical strength to dig and bury such a structure, and skilled in its construction. A prominent suspect quickly emerged, Werner Mazurek, an electrical repairman who lived disturbingly close to Ursula's family home. Mazurek was known in the community for his large, imposing build and a notoriously hot temper. Crucially, he was also deeply in debt, owing banks over 140,000 Deutschmarks, a financial motive that couldn't be ignored. When initially questioned about his whereabouts on the evening of Ursula's disappearance, Mazurek became flustered, unable to provide a clear account. However, the following day, he produced an alibi. He claimed to have been playing board games with his wife and a friend at the time of the abduction. Despite a thorough search of his home, police found no incriminating evidence, no traces linking him directly to the crime or the elaborate box. Without concrete evidence to contradict his alibi, and with no other leads proving fruitful, the investigation slowly, painfully ground to a halt. The case of The Girl in the Box became one of Germany's most enduring and chilling cold cases, an unresolved tragedy that haunted the nation for decades. The years following Ursula's disappearance bled into a decade, then two. The haunting silence of the cold case amplifying the collective grief and frustration. The name Ursula Herrmann became a whisper, a tragic footnote in the annals of German crime, a stark reminder of innocence lost and justice deferred. But technology, ever evolving, offered a glimmer of hope that would shatter the tranquility of a seemingly closed chapter. In 2007, almost 3 decades after Ursula vanished, police reopened the investigation, armed with modern forensic techniques that promised to coax secrets from the shadows. The re-examination led them back to Werner Mazurek, the electrician whose peculiar alibi and nervous demeanor had once drawn suspicion. A diligent search of his home, revisited with new eyes, yielded a crucial piece of evidence, an old tape recorder. This antique device, gathering dust in the quiet corners of his life, held the key to unlocking the truth, or so the investigators hoped. Forensic audio analysis, a science far more advanced than anything available in 1981, was applied to the ransom call recordings that had tormented the Herrmann family. The peculiar musical interlude, once just a chilling melody, was now meticulously scrutinized. Experts concluded that the specific sound signature, the very quality of the playback, was highly consistent with being produced by the vintage tape recorder found in Werner Mazurek's residence. It was a breakthrough, a tangible link after so many years of intangible despair. This new evidence, combined with the lingering suspicions from the initial investigation, solidified the police's conviction. Werner Mazurek, the man who lived so close to Ursula, the man of large build and volatile temper, was arrested and subsequently charged with kidnapping and murder. The trial that followed was a media sensation, rekindling the nation's fascination and horror with the Girl in the Box case. Werner Mazurek, now an older man, vehemently denied any involvement. He maintained his innocence, portraying himself as a victim of circumstantial evidence and a desperate police force. However, the prosecution painted a compelling picture. They presented the audio analysis, meticulously demonstrating the connection between Mazurek's recorder and the ransom calls. They brought forth neighbors who testified to his erratic temper, his financial woes, a substantial debt of over 140,000 Deutschmarks, and his familiarity with the dense forest where Ursula had disappeared and where her cruel tomb had been buried. The narrative wove together his potential motive, his capability to construct such an elaborate trap, and the damning audio evidence. Despite Mazurek's passionate pleas of innocence, the jury, after careful deliberation, was swayed by the weight of the new findings and the consistent character testimonies. In 2010, nearly 29 years after Ursula's tragic death, Werner Mazurek was found guilty of kidnapping leading to death and sentenced to life imprisonment. For many, it was a moment of profound relief, a sense that justice had finally, however belatedly, been served for the little girl who never made it home. Yet for some, the verdict brought not closure, but a fresh wave of unsettling questions. Among them was Michael Herrmann, Ursula's own brother. Initially, like the rest of his family, Michael had clung to the hope of a resolution, believing in the justice system's ability to find the truth. But as the trial unfolded and after the conviction, doubts began to gnaw at him. He revisited the evidence, particularly the pivotal audio recordings, with a meticulousness born of enduring grief and a burning need for certainty. Michael's deep dive into the case unearthed inconsistencies that refused to be silenced. He argued that the distinctive clanking sound audible in the ransom call recording, a detail forensic experts had struggled to fully explain, sounded more like a portable handheld recorder rather than the older stationary tape deck found in Werner Mazurek's house. It was a subtle but significant distinction that cast a shadow over the primary piece of evidence. Furthermore, Michael examined the ransom letters, the crude cut-and-paste messages that had demanded such an exorbitant sum. He found the German grammar within them to be strikingly clumsy, almost childlike, as if penned by a student or even someone who was not a native speaker. This grammatical awkwardness, Michael contended, was inconsistent with Werner Masaryk, a German adult who, despite his flaws, was presumed to be literate and articulate in his native tongue. These discrepancies, minor as they might have seemed to some, became monumental in Michael's quest for truth. He became a relentless advocate, not for his sister's killer, but for the principle of undeniable justice, even if it meant challenging the very system that had promised to deliver it. Michael sent impassioned letters to legal authorities, asserting Werner Mazuryk's innocence and demanding a re-examination of the evidence. His conviction was so profound that he ultimately sued the German state, pushing for the case to be reopened and the truth fully revealed. The legal battles were arduous, emotionally draining, and brought the family back into the public eye. In a testament to the lingering doubts, the court, acknowledging the psychological toll of the prolonged and controversial proceedings, ordered Werner Masaryk to pay a small compensation to Michael Herrmann for the mental distress caused during the trial, an unprecedented development that highlighted the fragility of the conviction. To this day, the case of the girl in the box remains one of Germany's most enduring and haunting criminal mysteries. The conviction of Werner Masaryk brought a semblance of closure, but Michael Herrmann's unwavering skepticism, fueled by his meticulous reevaluation of the evidence, continues to echo, challenging the official narrative. Was Werner Masaryk truly the ruthless kidnapper who orchestrated Ursula's horrific death? His guilt confirmed by the cold logic of forensic science and the testimony of his community? Or did a deeper, more insidious truth remain buried, obscured by the passage of time and the desperate need for an answer? The chilling question persists. Is the real perpetrator still out there, his crime unpunished, while an innocent man served time, or perhaps continues to serve for a deed he did not commit? The answer, elusive and painful, remains shrouded in the mists of history, forever entombed beneath the cold earth where young Ursula Herrmann was once tragically interred, carrying with her the full, unvarnished truth that may never see the light of day.